Well, thank you all for coming. Thanks for your patience getting going today. My name is Scott Pinsky, the chair of the Marin Coalition, and I want to thank you all for joining what I know is going to be an amazing program starting here in just a couple minutes. On the hot topics of today, we're honored to present for the first time here at the Marin Coalition the well-known and widely read senior political columnist for the San Francisco Chronicle, Joe Garofoli, who will be joined in conversation with today's moderator, your friend and mine, Greg Brockbank, who needs no introduction, but he's going to get one anyway in a couple minutes.
I was going to say, I really don't know.
So before we launch into today's discussion, let me just tell you about what's coming up in the next few months, and then we'll get right to it. Hopefully, a lot of these programs will be of interest to you and people you know, so spread the word. Our next event, November 13, we will have Matt Willis, the former head of the Department of Public Health here in Marin County. Sorry. He has presented for us before. He was a very important force during the whole COVID situation. No longer leading that agency, but he's still in the public health realm, and he's going to update us on what's going on in the world of public health here in Marin County. That's November 13. December 11, we're doing a program with Jason Freed, who's the executive officer of the Marin Local Agency Formation Commission. Sounds like a little bit of a wonky group, but they are the group that creates public entities and aligns the borders and boundaries of different public, whatever you call them, commissions, boards, districts, etc. And the issue of overlap and duplication is one that a lot of people have been interested in. So he's going to talk about that on December 11. January 8, we're doing a program co-sponsored with the League of Women Voters here in Marin County, and the topic is Human Trafficking in Marin County, Hidden in Plain Sight. So that will be a very important program. And then February 12, a program co-sponsored with the Marin History Museum. Presenters will be determined later, and the topic is Rancho Roots, the Californio Legacy of Marin, which will focus on the original land grants during the Mexican era and life here in Marin during that period, which I'm sure a lot of us don't know about. Okay, I want to get going, just adding to the fact that you can get information on these and other forthcoming programs at our website, marincoalition.org, which is also where you can find recordings of this event and all past events on our archive page. And you can just click on archive, go down the list, find the program you want, and watch the video for no cost. If anybody has one of these, please turn it off. And now let's get going. I want to tell you about our speakers today. We're privileged first to have Joe Garofoli, the San Francisco Chronicle senior political writer, covering national and state politics. Joe has worked at the Chronicle since 2000 and in the Bay Area since 1992 when he left the Milwaukee Journal. He was the host of It's All Political, the Chronicle's longtime political podcast, until the Chronicle ceased all of its podcast productions. In 2021, he won the Webby Award for Best Documentary Podcast for Chronicled Who Is Kamala Harris. He's won numerous awards, including the Polk Award in 2021, and he's covered everything from fashion to the Jeffrey Dahmer serial killings to 2 Olympic Games to the topic of his own vasectomy, which he discussed on NPR's Talk of the Nation after being told he couldn't use the word balls on the air. Is there a typo in here? Okay. Where'd we find this guy?
You asked me to.
Joe regularly appears on Bay Area radio and TV talking politics, and he's available to entertain at bar mitzvahs and first communions, preferably not at the same time. He's a graduate of Northwestern University and a proud native of Pittsburgh. He will be joined in discussion today by a familiar face, Greg Brockbank, a frequent guest here at Marin Coalition. Greg is a self-confessed political junkie of Marin politics, having compiled candidate lists for over 20 years. He appears frequently on public access TV to analyze and discuss local elections. Greg is a recently retired attorney and a current principal of Marin Law Center, a senior member and past chair of the Marin Democratic Party, and has served on the boards of several dozen civic and political organizations here in Marin, including 22 years as an elected official on the College of Marin Board of Trustees and the San Rafael City Council. Please join me in welcoming Joe and Greg.
Thank you. I'm going to try it without this. If anybody really needs it, let me know. But I got a good loud voice, and I think Joe will be fine too. We just don't have to pass it back and forth that way. I just have to tell you what an honor it is to me to sit here in front of you, a group I love. I've been coming to for 30 years. I was president of it 10 years ago, and I was doing all these political topics, and somebody told me, you don't have to do all politics all the time. I said, you don't? What fun is that? So I'm a little heavy on the politics, but I've also been a huge newspaper junkie, particularly for 50 years, particularly politics, particularly columnists. So I follow them all, the IJ and the Chronicle, for decades. I can name them all from memory very well. So when Joe comes along, he wasn't surprised out of nowhere like some, because I've been following his writing as a political writer, and it made perfect sense that he would then be a political columnist, and gets his mugshot in paper once in a while. And maybe you could start out by telling us how that happened. I mean, presumably you were a successful reporter in various areas, settled into a specialty like politics, I'm guessing. Yep. People liked you, like your bosses and the readers, and got good response, and now you're a senior political writer. What better title is there than that, especially for columnist junkies like me? How did that happen?
Well, it started, I covered all kinds of things. I covered, as I said in the intro, fashion when I was in Milwaukee. It's Milwaukee, so the bar was low. So I did, every job in the newsroom they asked me to do, I would say yes. I covered education, I covered crime, and then when I came to California, I covered entertainment and stuff when I was at the Contra Costa Times, and I came to the Chronicle, and I was a general assignment reporter, like a junior reporter, and then I just sort of made up a beat called, this is 25 years ago, Red versus Blue, where, mostly analyzing the cultural differences of between red and conservatives and liberals, and that kind of grew into writing about political things, and then I just continued doing that, and what was it, 10 years ago, I guess I was made senior political writer, and got the column shortly after that, and it's been fun. Originally I said I would write a column, but I wanted it to be a reported column, because I think it's kind of, there's so many people out there writing, Trump sucks, Democrats suck, blah, blah, blah. That's boring. I like to have reporting behind it, and if you read it online, there's links to just about everything I talk about. So you say, Joe's full of shit. Well, no, here's where the first, the original reporting is for that, or here's where the facts are to that, or the documentation is. So yeah, and it's very fun. It's fun. And in fact, I was. It's keeping me going. I was, they were offering everybody a buyout a year ago, and I was thinking about it, and I was like, well, no, this is almost exactly a year ago. I go, well, wait a minute, I'm going to know the next president of the United States. Turns out I didn't, so I stuck around, but it's still fun.
Well, that's great. I have to say, among the many things I love, I love a lot of things about your writing, but one of the great things, especially for this audience, I think, is that too many political writers, columnists, senior political writers, whatever their title is, I want to talk too about as you shift from being supposedly neutral as a reporter to being more opinionated, if that's the right word, as a columnist. But too many of them, it's too easy to just, if you're a Democrat, throw red meat to the Democrats and blast the Republicans who tune it out. And I presume Republicans do the same thing. And Democrats listen to mostly Democrats, and Republicans listen to mostly Republicans. Your writing is unusual to me in a way that doesn't throw red meat. It doesn't dismiss the other party. It tries to be fair and neutral and objective, much more than most do or succeed. How do you do that?
Well, and sometimes you just have to, it's a challenge, but it's, and sometimes you don't have to. Sometimes wrong is wrong. Like, trying to pull immigrants, turning the United States military on its own citizens is a violation of law. That's wrong. That's not easy to. It's easy to have an opinion on that.
Everybody's probably heard of the posse comitatus, but probably nobody knows what it is. Yeah. Even lawyers, even really obscure lawyers, but that's what Trump's violating.
Yeah, it's easy to have an opinion about demonizing and harassing immigrants, or the the least fortunate among us. So that's a no-brainer. But it's, but I'm not in the business of, in fact, a labor leader in San Francisco, had coffee with a couple months ago. He goes, I hate the press, but I like you because you don't take cheap shots. And sure, once in a while I do, and people call me out on it, and it's like, that was kind of a cheap shot. I'm more about, making a solid point and showing what's wrong and stimulating conversation about things. That's my philosophy of things. So, might be boring. It might not, get the clicks that, that people who are saying, Trump sucks or Democrats suck all the time. But, that's me.
As we walked in today, Scott Pinsky had an interesting comment that we had a delightful conversation on the phone, the three of us, a few weeks ago, and we started thinking about topics. We could come up with 10 or 20 or 30. You have a tough time coming up with 2 or 3 or 4 that we can talk about. But as Scott pointed out today, they've changed every week. But I would like you to address what may be, at least most weeks, the number one topic overall is our democracy under threat. Is free speech under threat? It's hard to be objective. I mean, Republicans are mostly probably saying, yes, that's fine, that's why we elected him, be tough, and he is. They're happy. Maybe most of you are happy. All the Democrats are going crazy. I was at a thing last night in Petaluma, non-political people, and every other question was, I don't understand why these people who love Trump, they're clueless, obviously, than most Democrats, and I don't blame them.
Well, we had a terrifying situation a couple of weeks ago with the Jimmy Kimmel thing. Now you might say, Jimmy Kimmel, all right, he's a comedian, talk show guy. He makes $16 million a year. He'll be fine. It wasn't about Jimmy Kimmel, but it was about all of us, because when the president says to the head of the Federal Communications Commission, basically giving him instructions, we got to do something about this guy. And when the head of a federal agency is saying, well, he's not funny, and these things aren't funny. Well, he's not a TV critic. His job is to regulate the airwaves. And if there were, tens of millions of people, turning away from Jimmy Kimmel because of what he was saying and doing, or doing something malicious, or doing the equivalent of yelling fire in a crowded theater, that would be something. But hate speech is free speech. You can talk shit about someone, but as long as nobody's getting hurt, and nobody was getting hurt with what he was saying. But when the federal government tries to control what is on the airwaves, the comedy shows are on the airwaves. That's scary for all of us, not just Jimmy Kimmel. So that was a very scary moment. I thought that the public spoke up, and that pushed back enough that, and by speaking out, we mean canceling their Hulu app. But that's what matters.
To me, it seems like a nonpartisan issue, because I think all of us, regardless of party and political perspective or orientation, like to think we grow up in a country that is free enough where people of all kinds can insult the president and the party in power of all kinds.
It's the greatest thing about our country.
It is wonderful. And I saw a list the other day in the paper where I get most of my information, listing, if you were a member of these 12 countries, and they're all horrible countries we wouldn't want to live in, yeah, you could, if you criticize the president, you're likely to get in trouble. But we are not one of those countries. At least we haven't been until now. But we are risking joining those dozen countries.
Not yet. Yeah.
It's very scary, and it bothers me. Now, when Trump claimed he won the election in 2020, 5 years ago, everybody said, oh my God, I'm terrified. He's not going to leave the White House. I said, don't be paranoid. Of course he's going to leave the White House. Well, I was right, but it was a closer call. I thought, this time I'm not so sure.
He went out fighting.
Yeah. But he did leave, and I think he realized that the people would obey President-elect Biden rather than the guy that lost, and everybody admitted he lost. By the way, this is the first time in my life I ever could imagine that newspapers and all the media would say that the president is lying. They just never said that before. We never had a president that so blatantly lied before.
Right. This happened. About I guess when Obama ran the first time. A friend of mine that lives nearby, my friend Bob, he's like, "Why don't you say these are lies? What people are saying about him?" And I go, "Well, to say something the way I was trained as a journalist. So if you say to use the word lie was very powerful. It has to imply intent. Did this person know that they were saying something legal? This person know that they were saying something that was a lie?" Well, then we said, screw that, and we're going to start calling out. So proposed a feature that we would do regularly. We called it lies, half-truths, and contradictions. And we would call it, it was like a fact check, but we would call things out as lies, like this is a lie, and this is a half-truth, and this is someone just contradicted their earlier position. And readers gave us feedback that was very helpful. But it was like, it helped to have, and this is one thing I do like about social media and such. There's many things that are horrible about it, but one thing is, the best thing about social media is it gives everybody a voice. And the worst thing about social media is it gives everybody a voice. And so, but you do get feedback very instantaneously. In fact, I haven't even looked about something I published a couple hours ago about it, but you do get feedback like, well, why don't you say that was a lie? Or like my neighbor, but this is my neighbor in real life saying, why don't you say it's a lie? And we did, and people appreciate it. So,
I appreciate that. A note on international relations. We have two hot wars going. I find it ironic that Trump campaigned and perhaps won on the basis of being, I'm the peace-loving president, no war during my time, I end all wars, I'm going to get the Nobel Peace Prize. And he might. Somebody told me today that this new peace treaty in Gaza, all of a sudden, whoa, it's actually happening. I kind of predicted Trump would try to do something like this. He really wants that Nobel Peace Prize, I think. Who wouldn't? But does he deserve it? I don't know. To me, he seems very warlike and warmongering and hawkish, and is more likely to get us into war because he's so unstable and he hangs around with autocratic dictator buddies that are also in trouble, not just Netanyahu, but Turkey and Hungary and Putin. How can he be as popular as he is with 4 buddies like that around the world?
right. Well, that's one of many things that may prevent him from getting the Nobel Prize is that he has supported Putin. He's picked 7 different sides in that war, but he has supported Putin. And the Nobel Committee does look for the entirety of one's, international standing, and so I don't think Trump's going to get it. I would not. I don't know what the betting markets are saying right now, but it's got to be low.
Really?
We'll find out tomorrow.
I would like to know what the betting markets are because, the first time Trump got elected, I think 90% of other Democrats said, well, it was just a fluke. That shouldn't have happened, couldn't have happened, will never happen again. And we didn't even think he'd be a serious candidate. He announces his re-election on the day he's sworn in the first time. But he's been running now for 9 and 10 years, and he couldn't believe, most of us didn't take it seriously. We couldn't believe with all that baggage he could possibly be re-elected.
I think that's what Democrats did. They overlooked what he's saying. He is speaking to people he's right on one thing. The system is rigged. The system is rigged in the favor of the wealthy. And I'm sorry to say that in the middle of Marin.
It's all right. Not all of us are wealthy, although that's a reputation.
But it is, and people are frustrated that they can't get ahead. They work hard. They play by the rules. They can't get ahead. And Democrats whiffed on that. They whiffed on speaking to their base. The people, people in labor unions, people who are immigrants and who are coming to this country and trying to play by the rules and get ahead.
So you're saying a lot of those people that traditionally voted for Democrats voted for Trump because he was saying the system is rigged in favor of the rich, and you think he's right to a large degree.
I think it is, and even everybody would agree to that. And look at the people who have swung. Young people, people of color, should be part of the Democratic base, but they have, and not in huge numbers, but in numbers that are significant enough to help him win, moved over to support him. Because why? Because they are the ones most impacted by what's going on. Why it's hard to, kids, how hard is it for your kids to get a house? How hard is it for them to pay for college? And get a job now. It's harder for them to do. So Democrats are not speaking to the economic concerns of people who are in their base.
I can't disagree, but when you say that the Democrats whiffed on using that argument effectively with people that should have been their base, I'm getting really confused because I think of the rich as natural constituents of the Republican Party for decades.
Right.
And particularly Trump, because he is rich himself, and so they would identify with him and he with them. And yet he campaigned ostensibly on the system is rigged in favor of rich people. And that appealed to poor people.
He says, I am your voice.
Why would people think that Donald Trump, of all people, would be a voice for poor people?
the first time he ran, I grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I was back there writing about the campaign, and I remember going to a group of Republicans, like a local Republican picnic, or whatever it was. And I was like, how can you guys, I mean, these are people I know in Western Pennsylvania. Trump has ripped off everybody he's worked with, especially working people who build his hotels, his casinos. He has a long line of people who he's rooked in the past. How can you go with this guy? It's like, because the system doesn't work. I want someone who's a fight. They say as a fighter, and will blow up the system. That's what he's doing.
Blow up is a key phrase. I remember Arnold Schwarzenegger 25 years ago when he was elected to governor. That was the very phrase he used.
Blow up the boxes.
Blow up the boxes. Blow up the boxes. Yeah. But I remember that really tapped into a strong feeling of the people that the bureaucracy was so messed up, he had to blow everything up to start over again, and that's why they voted for him. And I don't. And he did blow up some boxes. Not many as he probably wanted to and liked to, and a lot of his supporters wished he had. But he did that to some degree. And now I'm seeing the same thing with Trump. Although they don't use that phrase like Schwarzenegger did.
No.
What he's doing is exactly the same. He wants to blow up boxes. God, he's doing that in the federal government like it's never been done before, probably. And that's why I'm wondering what the long-term effects of this are. I mean, even the Supreme Court, I was thinking again this morning, I like to go to lectures on the Supreme Court, and you've got 3 that are his, 3 that are prior Democrat appointees, and only 3 by Democrats. So that's 6-3. It could take a while to reverse that trend. Now, but even they rein him in once in a while. And that is the only hope for Democrats. They won't get everything he wants, no matter how far-fetched, because once in a while, a Republican or 2 on the Supreme Court will not go along with it.
Right. And now he's threatening to invoke the Insurrection Act, which would give him very strong powers. This is an act from like 1807 or something like that. And it's written in such language that's kind of so antiquated that it can be very expansive. I'm sure a sharp lawyer would use that to say, oh, you can do this, you can do that, and that's what he's going to try and do to, send troops to the Bay Area, to the war zone of San Rafael. Who knows?
Usually, odd-numbered years, non-election years, non-federal election years, are quiet, slow, boring. Nobody cares about politics. We don't talk about politics. This is not one of those years, not just because of Prop 50, not just because of recalls, which I do want to talk about. And there are 2 races I do want to talk about, even in this early non-election year. Governor, and even more importantly, president in the future. Now, when we talked a few weeks ago, we all kind of thought, oh, Kamala's book had come out the day before. You just wrote a column on it. It was a delightful column. And from what I read, it's a delightful book, and it made us think, okay, this woman is bold. She's saying stuff that people don't usually write in their memoirs after they run a presidential election. And it made us kind of like her more, maybe, because she was bold. Since then, I've heard other opinions, like Bill Press, who's one of my favorite columnists, political correspondent, regularly every week, his podcast. He's a friend, and he said, that was a terrible thing she did. She's saying, don't blame me, and we do not want people like that. We do not need people like that. Whether or not she runs for president again, she should not win, and she will not win. What do you think of that?
That she will not win? I don't think she will win the nomination again, because
people don't like losers.
People don't like losers.
Same with Hillary.
Democrats don't. Republicans, actually, they promote them over time.
Nixon?
In the past, if you run a couple times, McCain ran, and Romney ran.
Reagan
previously. Reagan ran. Nixon, yes. He promised that we wouldn't have him to kick around, but we had him to kick around for another 20 years.
Well, he sort of retired after he lost the governor's race, 2 years after he lost the president's race. Yeah. And we thought, okay, that's the end of Richard Nixon. But you're right, he came back.
Yeah, so I don't think she may run. I saw her speak in San Francisco shortly, like it was one of her first speaking gigs after public appearances and after the election. And then she had a group of reporters, I think I told you about this, sort of an off-the-record conversation afterwards. And I don't want to convey that what was in that, but it definitely got the impression that she was not going to run for governor and had her eyes set on Washington. If you notice in her statement that she issued right after she said she wasn't going to run for California governor, she did not close the door on running for the White House again. She certainly would have the donors, but she's going to have competition for those donors now. And I think, she definitely created a lot of goodwill during the race, because it's next to impossible. It's building the plane as you're flying it to run a campaign for president in 107 days. And she did a good job of that. But, you know, there's definitely some missteps, but I don't think there's going to be too much competition.
Well, maybe you could mention some of the other candidates. It seems to me that usually Democrats have crowded slates of 10 or 12 people running for president. It's quite entertaining. Hillary's been the front runner twice, and once she was beaten by Obama, who came out of nowhere. But usually there's these large crowded fields, and we'll see who comes out of them. This year I'm having a little more trouble. Of course, it's a little early, 3 years early, but Buttigieg might be up there, and maybe
Yes.
Kamala was right that he would have been excellent, except that she didn't dare appoint a gay guy, because a black woman and a gay man, that just wouldn't win.
She said in her book, a black woman married to a Jewish guy and a gay guy in the ticket. I don't know. She was asked by Rachel Maddow on her show, I don't know if you all saw that, and it was very uncomfortable for her. And she says, well, maybe I was too cautious, which is the longtime rap on Kamala, is that she's too cautious. And, you know, that question coming from Rachel, who's been a longtime activist in the LGBTQ community and the East Bay Zone, you know, grew up here. I think that really was an uncomfortable question for her. So
I want to ask you about Gavin Newsom. I've been a long-time supporter and fan. I even introduced him when he was first running for governor against Jerry Brown 15 years ago. It didn't last long, because Jerry Brown was such an overwhelming frontrunner. But then 8 years later, Gavin Newsom was an overwhelming frontrunner, and he's been consistently popular and survived a recall, and was more popular after the recall than before, probably. And when they first started talking about him as president, it made perfect sense, governor of California. But I thought, you know, I read an article that convinced me that he has a different skill set. He's a good governor, but wouldn't be a good president. And I believe that. And I thought that Gavin knew that. But I'm beginning to think he's either disregarding it, or they were wrong, or he's wrong, and now he is running for president, I think. I'm just not sure whether he would be a good president or not, because he may not have that skill set. But he certainly is positioning himself as the national Democratic opponent to Trump in a more aggressive way than anybody else. Any senators or other governors doing?
no, what he's doing with Prop 50 is certainly boosted his national profile. But the big question on Newsom is, does he travel outside of California? Does he travel? What would people in South? You know, think of the early primary states: South Carolina, Nevada. Where does he go? My native state of Pennsylvania, Western Pennsylvania. I don't know if, you know, he would come off as he would always be the mayor of San Francisco, and, you know, slick-looking politician guy. I don't know. Michigan, Wisconsin. I don't know if that travels. That's the outstanding question. He definitely has some of the best political skills in the business. He sees around the corner better than just about anybody. This Prop 50 thing is a good example of it, along with, you know, he was out front on obviously same-sex marriage and cannabis, but you know, we don't know. His biggest challenge is Gavin Newsom. You know, most of his wounds are self-inflicted, so we'll see.
He does make mistakes. I was always amazed that it was his second term as mayor or something, that he had an affair with his scheduler's wife, who was also his appointment secretary. Campaign manager's wife, who was his scheduling secretary. How could you survive that? But he now got reelected as mayor, got elected as lieutenant governor twice, and governor twice, now the leading candidate for president of the United States.
Right. I'll never forget his press conference when he did that. He came out and he basically said, everything that you've heard is true. And kind of, it was, I think, the shortest press conference ever. And let's be real. He was mayor of San Francisco. That's the best city to have that thing happen to.
True, but yeah,
Or
governor of California,
do that.
lieutenant governor and governor, that's 4 statewide elections he won. Despite that, a few years earlier.
It's never really, it's come up, but people are like, whatever.
I guess. I think the electorate is changing. They would never. I mean, remember what a scandal it was that
Look
Reagan.
who's our president now.
Well,
Oh my goodness.
When Reagan was first elected president, it was a scandal that he had been divorced before. He was happily married to Nancy Reagan for years and decades, but having a divorced man in the White House, oh my God.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow.
Anyway, but there's. So Gavin, would you say he's the front runner?
Well, the early polls in terms of recognition, he's definitely up there, yeah. I mean, but it's way too early.
I agree, but Buttigieg.
It's like picking the Super Bowl from 3 years ago.
I know, and I hate falling into this trap, because I often criticize the fact that all people care about is president. They don't pay attention to any other races for the whole 4 years, practically, of every cycle. And so I'm feeding into that by 3 years early, saying, well, who are the other candidates? Who are the other front runners? But I just wonder if there's anybody out there that we're missing. For example, I was surprised, and I want to go to the governor's race in a minute, that Katie Porter, of all people, suddenly the front runner with 18% of those voters support or something. Now that's probably because she's the only one that's run statewide against Schiff, and she's widely regarded as a congresswoman and as a senatorial candidate. So there's some logic to that. It's just governor. Okay, let me think about this. Okay, let me see her here. Okay, okay. But so any other presidential candidates worth mentioning at this early stage?
I looked at the governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania. Those are a couple of the stronger ones, I think. Yeah.
And when you hear about people like that, often senators or sometimes they're governors. Actually, governors usually win. Senators usually lose. They like that they floated around for a few months as possible presidential candidates, and they usually do run. Usually they don't get very far because they're not well enough known outside their own state to get the traction, to raise the money, to get the endorsements, and so they're running around running a campaign, which they big time is spending a lot of money but not raising the money, and they drop out after not too long. Unless they make it through a few debates, and then they start gaining traction. But even then, if there's so many of them, 10 or 12, none of them get more than a few percent.
You have to have a good ground operation right away, and you have to have some sugar daddies. Which, speaking of sugar daddies, J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, heir to the Hyatt Hotel fortune, he'll definitely have enough money to run a campaign.
Democrats don't like self-funded rich candidates as much as Republicans do.
They will if he wins.
Well, if they thought he was the only one that could win, they'd go for him. That allowed it's happened before, I just people would rather not. But it's the same issue as when Biden was running and for the third time or whatever, and people said, but he's the most logical. He's the front runner after losing the first 4 primaries, which has never happened before. But a lot of us were thinking, well, wait a minute, I'm a little more progressive than Biden. I'd like somebody like Bernie. Bernie could beat Trump just as easily. Trump is dead meat. He's toast. Maybe the people saying Biden's the only one that could win were right. He won. Maybe nobody else could.
Well, he could also, he was able to get the most loyal voters in the party, black voters, particularly black women, to vote for him, where the others couldn't. Bernie had a problem connected with black voters, and Buttigieg really does, which is, he is. I've had him on the podcast. I've never been around someone who's spoken complete paragraphs like him. You could ask him any question, and he gives a very smart, reasoned, like human answer. The weird part was, walking to the podcast studio, he's like kind of stiff. He usually bullshit with someone, and Buttigieg was, he was fine, but he wasn't like, warm and fuzzy. But he's a McKinsey, he's a McKinsey analyst. I think his brain is wired that way. But an excellent thinker and speaker, but he had a lot of problems when he ran with black voters, and your path to the Democratic nomination is hard if that's your route.
Let's talk about the California governor's race. There have been a number of candidates, but it's kind of the opposite. For many years, Jerry Brown was the front runner, and he served for 8 years, with strong support all the time. Exactly the same with Gavin Newsom. Front runner for years, served now for 7 years with strong support. So we haven't had a competitive governor's race in a long time, but looks like we got one now.
We have one now, yes.
In single digits mostly, except for Katie Porter. And I watched that debate on YouTube recently. Anybody see the debate on YouTube between the governor's candidates? I just heard about it a day or two before.
Which was this, the Labor?
Governor's, a week or two ago.
Oh, I didn't see that one.
I didn't even know about it. I probably read it in the newspaper or something.
Was it before the Labor Federation, or which one are you speaking of?
It may have been.
There's been a couple.
There have been, yeah, and they're not well enough publicized. I wish they were, because we need to see these people. They're all like statewide elected officials or comparable. They're all held in good regard. I don't know really anything negative about any of them. I like them all, know them. Some of them I've met personally and know them. The one I like the best until recently, and I don't dislike her, I don't like her any less, is Betty Yee, because she's been an statewide elected official the longest. She's like the smartest. She's got a handle on the problem. She's also very big in the Democratic Party. She's the vice chair of the state Democratic Party. And even though she's not in office now, or maybe she's on the Board of Equalization or something, I don't know, but she is, I think, would be very, very good. But so would some of the others. But the debate really clarified for me who's ready, who's not. Katie Porter was by far the best, not just the front runner. She was articulate, clear, knew how to tell people what they wanted to hear, but also in straight terms that sounded like, that's the truth, she's got it, yeah, she could be governor. Antonio Villaraigosa was at the opposite end of the spectrum. He's 72, Luke 92. He was horrible. He couldn't talk, he couldn't speak, he couldn't do anything, he wasn't in sync, forget it. And there were one or two others that were not very good, but one or two others who were pretty good. So they're all over the spectrum. And
Well, I'm not to pick any favorites here, but I just have to say that I had coffee with Via Ragosa in Oakland a couple of weeks ago, and I was remarking, it's like, man, this guy looks great for 72. I mean,
he may, but he sure wasn't good that day in that debate. It's like, I didn't think Biden was too bad until the debate. And they're like, oh my God, we're in trouble. And he hadn't even taken a foot on stage yet. You could see it in the wings. And why he didn't know that, I don't know. Why Kamala didn't come out, I don't know. It was a bad mistake.
It was a very bad mistake, yeah.
But you can sort of see it. Kamala was right. If she'd suggested it, it would look terribly self-serving. Why don't you step down? I'll be the candidate. It's not like you want to be president or anything.
Right. That was what she said in the book was, it would be self-serving of me to say that Joe should not run. And she said that her mistake, along with everyone in their circle, was that they repeated it like a mantra. Joe and Jill know that Joe and Jill want to run. Joe and Jill want to run. And so they didn't listen to their guts, and we got what we saw.
But the interesting things I've read in all the analysis is the election when I woke up and said, how did Trump win? How did Kamala lose? I guess I was just ready to slide in from the Biden presidency to the Harris presidency because Trump couldn't possibly win. Here he is, and we're all going, oh my God. And I've never checked out in my life. I checked out for a day and a half. I thought that was so long. I felt horribly guilty. Everybody else checked out for months. Many of them have never checked back in. So I mean, it's the opposite of 8 years ago. 8 years ago when Trump won, within 24 hours, the outrage was massive. Remember all the women's marches around the country? Hundreds of thousands, millions of people were out there saying, no, we will fight every step and we will not allow this. That was on his first day in office. 8 years later, it's like, oh, Trump again. Oh, God, I just can't deal with it. Don't you think?
There's a lot of that. The No Kings rally was very powerful. I think that was, I believe it would be the second largest demonstration of all time in this country. And there's another one coming up October 17th, I think. 18th?
Yes, October 18th.
Thank you. So that'll happen again. I think there's even more. There's a lot of momentum now with all the other stuff with the, federalizing troops, the attacks on immigrants, the tariffs, and people are going to start getting their health care premiums for next year. That may move some people too, because a lot of hospitals are, they're projecting out, we're not going to get the same reimbursements, so we're going to have to raise our rates on all of us. And so, especially if you are getting your health care through the healthcare exchange, through Obamacare, and those rates are going to be going up, because you're not on top of the hospital, the healthcare companies raising money, raising their rates. You're not going to be getting most people aren't going to be getting their reimbursements.
We haven't talked about the shutdown, and we should, but before that, you mentioned detaining immigrants. I read a statistics which kind of put it in perspective, but also mystifies me today or yesterday in the paper, where I get everything. And when I say the paper, I mean the Chronicle and the
I'm going to get you doing some ads for us.
Religiously, but I'm the last old-fashioned newspaper junkie we should talk about here.
God bless you.
But anyway, the statistics are that 56% of people agree with with the position that illegal immigrants should be deported. So Trump starts with a slight majority of people that believe that they should be deported. That's a pretty basic, plain statement. Illegal immigrants should be deported. When they're asked if they think he's gone too far in his tactics, a majority agree with that statement.
Yes.
So apparently a slight majority say, yeah, deport them, but a slight majority must say, don't go too far. Is that going to restrain Trump? I don't think so.
No. But it's sort of parallel to what, when you ever see polls about Congress. Do you think, who likes Congress? No, they suck. Do you like your member of Congress? Well, Huffman's pretty good. He's an okay guy. Nancy Pelosi, I like her. So it's that kind of duality, because we all should, and the finer point is, I think what there's even more support for is that if people are in this country illegally and they've committed a crime, should they be deported? Absolutely, yes. People are all, but if it involves my friend who I go to church with, who I play soccer with, who is a friend of my kid, no, I don't want that family going. That's horrible.
And the stories get worse from there. The kids are afraid to go to school. They're terrified. They're
Afraid to go to
traumatized.
school,
They're going to need a lot of mental health care. And the economy suffers.
Doctor, yeah, absolutely.
And I'm just not sure why everybody doesn't get that all the studies show that immigrants contribute, even illegal immigrants, contribute more to the economy. They think they don't pay any taxes. That's not true. They pay a lot of taxes. Some they don't pay, some they overpay, some they pay that they're never going to see benefit from. And this country is built on immigrants and survives and thrives on immigrants, but white people want to deport them? I don't know.
And also the crime rate attributed to immigrants is lower than it is to native-born Americans. But these are stats. These are, God forbid, they're facts. And those don't, they are often trumped by the fiction.
I used to use the word all the time, but now I try not to.
Yes.
But
It's a tough verb.
it's just confusing.
It's a confusing verb.
Why use that verb, right? Exactly. I want to ask you about the shutdown because this is perhaps the most grudging respect I've ever had for Trump, and it lasted about 2 seconds, is that when I heard, oh my God, this shutdown is really going to happen, of course they say that every few months, and then they come up with a last-minute resolution because it's in everybody's best interest. This time I thought, okay, this is really going to be a shutdown. Then I heard that Trump was going to meet with the leaders. I said, if anybody can make a deal, it'll be Trump. Because he's got, all the Republicans are terrified of him. They'll do whatever he says. And way too many Democrats. Sometimes I think it's most of them. So if anybody can do a deal, it's Trump. And he probably does not want this on his record to shut down. So he's going to get it done in a day or two. He didn't. So now, but the only thing that would keep him from, and I bet he could if he wanted to, the only thing that would keep him from doing a deal is he can do better if he blames it on the Democrats. He likes to blame things on Democrats. I'm not saying Democrats don't do that, but so we've got an ongoing thing over a few Democrats cave, but not enough. They need a few more. Are they going to get them, or is Trump, are the Republicans going to give in and say, okay, let's give these people health care that you've cut?
If that's the deal, that might close it. But 57% of the people who are facing those cuts live in counties that or live in congressional districts that are represented by Republicans. So if his fellow Republicans come to him and say, "I'm getting killed on this," then he might have a force against him. That's where it's always the public pressure. As Pelosi says, the outside pressure is always more powerful.
If we go back to one comment, and I hope it doesn't sound too partisan, it's just a legitimate question that I need to know the answer to is, I started out by saying here today that I love this group because it's much more bipartisan and nonpartisan than most. And I think most of us get sucked into our various partisan bubbles, whether it's Democrat or Republican, and we don't get a chance as often as we should to talk to people from the other parties. And I love sitting here talking to people from the other parties. I get an opportunity to do it here that I don't get anywhere else, and I love it. Example, in the last few months, I've met the new chair of the Republican Party who's sitting right over there, and another of his compadres on the Republican Central Committee. I really enjoy getting to do that. I really enjoy talking to him. I hope he could tolerate talking with me, because I enjoy it so much. And I had a couple of meetings I've been at with him too, and both of them, and I like it. No King's rally came up for 1 second, and I imagine they probably think it's just the Democrats demagoguing. Oh, Trump just wants to be a king. Oh, give me a break. It is a legitimate concern. I think it's a legitimate use of it. I can understand the Republicans resenting it a little bit.
Sure.
But one of them made a comment about, what about Obama? I think what he was saying is, you would like to have Obama king, or I think what I would say is, did the Republicans ever complain about the Democrats wanting to make Obama king? No. There was no basis for that. But there is basis for fearing Trump is way overreaching the powers any president has ever even imagined in this country.
One of the scary things is he's treating the Department of Justice, which is an independent part of government, as his own law firm, essentially. And then I was out, I think I told you this when the whole Alcatraz, he wanted to turn Alcatraz into a functioning prison again, disregarding the fact it would take a ridiculous amount of, like, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to bring it up to code, including trekking all the human waste that is produced on the island, off the island. There's no waste system there, which that's probably a bonus for Trump, because he would bring a lot of shit into San Francisco. We couldn't, he sent Attorney General Bondi out and the head of the Interior, Doug Burgum, here, and they also turned her in afterwards. And so, usually when cabinet secretaries come to the Bay Area or California, I get a call, hey, you want to talk to the Secretary of Agriculture? And usually I'm like, no, that's all right, I'm good. But I was like, they wouldn't even confirm that they were coming out. We had to get it through other back channels. So we rented a boat, and I went to the entrance of Alcatraz, waiting for her to show up just to make sure she did. And then I brought a bunch of signs, like with my questions on them, and held them up and yelled them to her. Of course, she was like, so far away she couldn't hear them. but then a tourist boat going to Alcatraz came over, and then they were filming me like yelling, this little bald guy yelling questions to the Attorney General, like, what the hell, look at this guy, what's he doing? And it's like, that's the state of affairs right now. We're yelling, we're renting boats and yelling questions across 50 yards of water.
So the Secret Service did tackle you like they
Yeah,
did.
I was like Padilla.
We were just trying to ask beyond the question. Like, excuse me, I'm a U.S. Senator. Could I ask you? Wow.
Yeah. Speaking of governor, that's another person who may run for governor.
Padilla, yeah. Talk about running for statewide office. He was elected twice as Secretary of State. Yes. Now he's a U.S. Senator and was elected. Twice. So that's name recognition. He just seems to have a quiet, mellow, nice guy. I know nothing negative about him, but you know, people want a hard-charging fighter. Someone like Adam Schiff, but he's brand new in the Senate.
Right. And Padilla is a smart guy, very smart. He is examining all the numbers now, see if he could do this. Because unlike if Kamala Harris had run, she would have shot to the top of the polls because name recognition, obviously she's vice president, and money. Padilla doesn't have the money network, or is tapped into the money network, nor does he have the name recognition. So it would be a harder fight for him. Plus, you can't beat a better job in politics than U.S. Senator. There's no real, you don't have to fill any potholes. Nobody sees you at the grocery store and says, hey, what about this crossing light at my street? Or I need a curb cut. You know, no senator has to deal with the actual constituents dealing with them. You know, you might get a protest now and again, but it's a cush job.
There's a lot of overlap between senators and governors in that they often go back from one office to the other. I read a few decades ago that if you're in a small state, being a senator is better. You're still one of 100 senators, and that's a lot of clout, even if you're from a tiny state. Right. But if you're in a big state, being governor is better because you're the chief executive of a huge state, and if you're governor, you're just one of 100.
The world's fourth largest economy is our governor's fond of repeating.
I want to ask you about one topic, which is a pet peeve of mine, and somebody was talking about it on the way in, and I said I'd try to bring it up because for about 20, 30 years now, my favorite political topic, nonpartisan topic, I think, is, although it's only Democrats that support it presently, I don't know why, and I was in charge of the 2 campaigns countywide in this county that had this, but most people never heard of it, don't know anything about it, understand it, and that is publicly financed elections. Everybody complains about money in politics, and they've never heard of Arizona and Vermont, which have had publicly financed elections from the top of the ticket to the bottom for 20 years, works very well, a red state and a blue state. You go around, instead of getting $100 contributions, $1,000 contribution, $10,000 contribution, you get a $5 contribution. That's the limit with a signature endorsing you. And if you get so many of those, you can opt in to be a publicly financed candidate. They give you a bunch of public money. And then waitresses and low-income people can run for legislature. Now they can't. But in those 2 states they can. It's made a difference in who gets elected to the legislature and the kind of laws they pass. Works perfectly well because we all know that too much money dominates too many causes and too many things in too many states, including California. And it got killed when it was on the ballot 15 years ago because special interests beat it. So then, they did it again with a limited, pilot project 8 years out for just the Secretary of State's office, and it got killed again. Special interests beat it. Secret special interests. So the California Clean Money Campaign, and again, this should be a nonpartisan interest. And some Republicans love it, but not too many. But it should level the playing field. It should be much more fair. The good government groups like the League of Women Voters like this, but it's still so obscure that people don't get it yet, like proportional vote representation, ranked choice voting and proportional representation. But and I'll leave it at this, I'd love your opinion, and then we'll probably want to get questions because we probably missed a bunch of topics besides the 8 or 10 we've covered. Wouldn't it make sense as a bipartisan measure to get excessive money out of politics, which everybody hates on both sides? The Democrats will scream, the Republicans will scream, and the labor unions will scream because they all get influenced that way. But if we had publicly financed elections, it would be a hell of a lot easier to run, and people wouldn't feel the system is rigged because only rich people and their rich friends can run and win because I can't raise the money. That's what 90% of people think, and they're right.
Yes, and you also pinpointed the reason why it would never pass because of the labor unions and and Google and everybody else who dumps so much money into politics right now would be neutered. And so they would never let that happen. Because they have a better shot at leveraging their campaign contributions to get what they want, under this system than they would under that.
I think we're going to see it on the ballot again soon. They just took a detour that they thought would be a year or two, and it was turned out to be a decade. And that is to get what's called the Public Disclosure Act, the Disclose Act laws passed. I say plural because it started out to be one act saying that on statewide ballot measures, when you send out a mailer or have a TV ad or a radio ad, it should list the top 3 funders. Because right now they say Californians for mom and apple pie, which tells you nothing, of course. But if it said Chevron, Mobil, and Exxon, well, that tells me something. Maybe I don't want to vote for that. And so we needed this Disclose Act to keep the special interests from anonymously beating us on the publicly financed elections. But it took year after year after year after year. Finally, we won it. And then we had to win clarification after clarification after expansion after, and finally we won all those. And now they're all in place. Now maybe we can run a publicly financed election, statewide race again, and maybe it'll win this time because it won't be beaten by anonymous special interests because they have to disclose themselves.
Yeah, that's a lot of hurdles, but there was a Republican who ran for governor a couple of times, John, how am I spacing his name? Anyways, he sponsored a ballot measure where members of the legislature would have to wear all of their donors, they would wear on their shirts.
Like NASCAR
drivers. You know, like, you ever see a NASCAR driver, they say, Mobil and, Pennzoil and blah, 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 blah. And so this would be like, PG&E and Google and the California Teachers Association and whatever. And so they have to wear those around.
It's delightfully appealing, Hey, I'm a legislator, I got sponsors, here they are.
Yeah.
You should know who they are.
Yeah. So I always thought that would be a great idea, but that did not make it onto the ballot.
We've been talking about an hour. We've covered so many great topics in such a short period of time. It's great. But I bet there's a bunch of topics we have not covered that are very good that they would like to hear. Yes.
And I'll take that around. First of all, what do you guys think? Amazing, huh? I knew this was going to be a special conversation, and sorry, I'm gonna.
Turn it off.
It's gone. Sorry. Had a little technical issues today. Let's move around the room and do questions. I want to start with a question of my own because I was intrigued by the conversation where you're talking about the polling for Trump's immigration policy versus the polling for people who think illegals should be deported generally. And there was a disconnect there. People generally thinking, yes, let's get rid of illegal aliens, quote unquote, but not the way he's doing it. And listening to that discussion triggered for me the notion, and I when I was in graduate school, I took a course on public opinion survey research, okay, polling, which is a bizarre field if you think about it. You guys know more about it than I do, but the guys and gals who form the polls, and they craft the questions, and then those questions go out there, and the poll results come back. They're crafting questions that are maybe missing the mark. So, for example, the 2 polls that you just talked about on immigration, they don't dig down into the details of that issue. They don't ask you, well, do you think illegal workers in farms who are harvesting your crops need to go away, in which case there's going to be nobody harvesting crops anymore. That's the question people really need to understand. But the poll is so general and 50 feet above the ground that you don't really get people's opinions on those kinds of things.
And the biggest problem with polling right now is people aren't answering the pollsters' questions. I mean, very few people have, I think me and many people in this room have landlines, and so it's harder. You can get people on cell phones, but people just don't answer. Do you ever answer the phone if it's someone you don't know?
No.
No, hell no, nobody does.
But don't they do polling other ways?
They do other ways, and there's a lot more online polling. Sometimes those are sort of self-selecting folks, so that the results can be a little off.
But they try to compensate for that.
They try and compensate for that, and you also, if you're really going to do a good thorough poll, like digging down, as you said, you got to have someone who's on the phone with you or connected with you for 20 minutes, 25 minutes.
No one will give you.
Who wants to do that?
Right. All right.
Some of us are junkies. I see a polling online.
You would do that.
Boy,
You would do that.
you're right. I didn't mean that rare.
No, Mike, just go for it, one by one.
Okay, so Proposition 50 and the House of Representatives in Washington. What's going to happen between now and next November?
So, Proposition 50, does everyone know what that is?
Yeah, Spotsman spoke about it last week,
Okay.
last month here.
Great. The early polls on it were, it was maybe at 48% or so, and at this point, you want to be 60% before the no people just start chopping at you and saying how terrible the idea is at any statewide ballot measure. So it's starting. It was a little rickety. But late, and even talking with some of Newsom's close advisors, and they're like, this is going to be close, like 52-48, 51-49 close. We don't know if that's going to change at all. It's entirely, their premise is, in fact, you're going to see an ad on Friday that's going to start rolling out, funded by Tom Steyer, the wealthy guy who lives in San Francisco, ran for president.
Big environmentalist.
Yeah, environmentalist, yeah. Former hedge fund guy. And he was, and it's going to say, are you want to do something to push back against Trump? And that's what they're going to try and tap into, the emotional feeling that many Democrats have, like, oh my God, all these crazy things that we've talked about so far. I want to do something. What can I do? What can I do? Like marching a No Kings rally, that's fine, but what can I do? You can vote for Prop 50, and this is going to give you the ability to, and it's not even a sure thing. You're basically, it's almost a sure thing. You're giving the power to redraw the boundaries so it's friendlier to Democrats and make it more likely that they will pick up seats in Congress next time. Pick up 5 more seats to counter what's going on in Texas. And it's a short-term thing in California. It's going to be for the next 3 elections. I think it reverts back in 2032. And but it's an emotional appeal to, like, what can I do? I'm so frustrated. I want to do something. This is what you can do. It's a crapshoot, you know.
So what's going to happen in the House? Are we going to have a permanent Republican majority because of gerrymandering in all of the red states?
Yeah, but there's not. There's a few states that said red states have said they're going to gerrymander. Some have. Texas obviously with 5, and then Missouri tweaked their lines. They have another seat, but there's not. I mean, everyone's kind of at capacity, and you have to have really the political will to do that in all these red states, and the ability to do it. And it's not at this point. It's not going to be. I don't see a permanent Republican majority coming out of purely gerry. I mean, many states already are gerrymandered.
And I don't think a Republican majority in the House can perpetuate itself by making sure that it stays Republican. I've long felt for decades that demographically, I'm sure you can verify, Joe, that we are moving slowly Democratic because young people and people of color are mostly Democratic, and that we are becoming more young people and more people, well, actually becoming more old people, but the demographics are such that we are becoming slowly more Democratic. That's why every time there's a Republican victory, I say, how did that happen? This was never supposed to happen again.
But as they say, demographics are not destiny, as we've seen in Texas. Texas is a huge Latino population, and they're not, because, going back to what I said, Democrats have not addressed the economic insecurity that people feel. And if they, just because someone's Latino or black doesn't mean they're going to be a Democrat. They won't vote. And that's what we're seeing, people not voting.
The other possibility is, I remember when I was a kid and I was taking a vacation in my family car as a little kid, and we all had assignments to learn various things like the states and the state capitals and the presidents, and also what various weird words meant, like gerrymander. And I knew at the time that nobody had heard of this word. And that was cool because I learned what gerrymander meant. That was 60 years ago, 70, 65 years ago. Now, a lot more people know it, but still not near enough. When enough people know what gerrymander is and what a horrible thing it is, Supreme Court has currently said it's okay to politically gerrymander, but not racially gerrymander. So everybody knows racially gerrymandering is not okay, but political gerrymandering is okay. As soon as they change their minds on that, then we will have enough people join an interstate compact, like and to do what California and some other states do, but only a few, and have redistricting commissions. It's ironic that when we approved redistricting commission 15 years ago, which is a good thing, a good government thing, the League of Women Voters pushed it, and the Republicans opposed it and the Democrats opposed it because they lost power that they would have had.
Yes.
But some have come around, but there's some remarkable hypocrisy on the part of both parties about this. The Republicans, who once said, this is a bad idea, we do not want an independent commission, we want the legislature to continue to district. But now they're saying, oh no, it's commission, gotta keep that commission, do not vote for Prop 50. Because it's in their best interest, they don't want those new Democratic seats. I understand that. And the Democrats who once said, no. Well, we have to put off the commission. Yeah, the commission's a good thing, but we got to put it off for 6 years, and then we'll come back to it. And let's see what everybody else gets smart and does the same good thing too.
Well, I'll tell a quick Willie Brown story that comes with redistricting. So the reason we have an independent redistricting commission in California where people who are not part of the political system, draw the maps, and it's been hailed on both sides as being pretty good. But in the old days, the legislators would draw their own maps, and they would say, okay, here's your district. And someone would say, well, the legislator would be like, well, wait a minute, I can't win with that district. I need this neighborhood that they have more Democrats, I need that neighborhood, or I can't take these. And so I went to, I had coffee with Willie Brown a few weeks ago after this plan came out, and because he was the master of doing this, because it would entrench everybody in power, because you would pick your own voters essentially. And I said, but then the weird thing was, so people were handed their districts, and even when they're like, oh, I'm gonna have to be out of a job, then you'd have to vote for it. I said, how would you get people to vote for something that put them out of work? And he goes, I just get them a judgeship. It's like, what? It's like, yeah. Now, he couldn't do that on his own, but he would strongly suggest to Jerry Brown or whoever the governor was at that point, hey, this guy, get him a judgeship.
They're not all lawyers in the legislature, even though everybody thinks so.
Yeah.
It's less than half.
And so, and I said, what about the Republicans? He goes, I get them elected to Congress. And I was like, that doesn't make any sense. He goes, I don't care. Get them out of my hair. So it's like,
Yes.
so that's the mentality that was in California and in many other states before this commission.
By the way, the origin of that word I learned at age 7 or whatever is that there was an 18th century Massachusetts governor named Elbridge Gerry. It's pronounced G-E-R-R-Y, but Gerry. And he drew, there's usually one in every jurisdiction, who draws these convoluted maps. That was 250 years ago, and it's still true today. And he drew this map, and his district was this strange curly thing, and somebody looked and said, oh, it's like a salamander, so that's where the word gerrymander came from. and now there are rules, but they should be contiguous. They should reflect communities of interest. That's the only real change. They should do all these other good things, and then, yeah, that's kind of a good idea. But people are always going to argue about it. People are going to do all kinds of strange things, and it'll always be that way unless we have independent commissions everywhere.
Yeah, Democrat, and there was one Democratic district that was so thin, and on the west coast of California, I think it was from Oxnard to Monterey County, that they said it would disappear at high tide. It was like, so it was,
and the other great line besides the original one about gerrymandering that gave it its name, I think it was John Burton who was the master of this 50 years ago.
R.I.P.
And he created a district for his little brother John, who was kind of an unknown ne'er-do-well, but he became quite a force in California politics, as you know. But he had a district which ranged from part of San Francisco through Marin, all the way around to Vallejo. Now, if that isn't a weird district in the Bay Area, I don't know what is. And when asked about that, isn't it John Burton that gave that famous reply about that weird-shaped district? It is my contribution to modern art. Wasn't that John Burton?
Yes,
Why don't we just go around the room? Go ahead.
It was reassuring last week to see the
Filbert.
800 admirals and generals stand up, or rather stay down, and Trump make a fool out of himself in front of them. They did not break ranks. They did not, they kept it quiet. But what mesmerizes and fools me, and I don't understand at all, is why does the right not break ranks today? Where is the John McCain of old, and what's the lockup there? And is it driven by with the system? We're all in on this because if you stand up, put your hand up, we're going to primary you.
Bingo.
Well,
Why don't people stand up to their boss at work? They don't want to lose their job. And Trump is shameless in saying, I'll primary you, and I will, we'll run a Republican to the right of you, and I'll fund it, or Elon will fund it, or in days past.
So it's that powerful now?
Oh,
But that's
absolutely.
just for the 1% of people that are politicians. But the military you mentioned is a good example. Why don't they push back? I think they're in a unique position too, because unlike the average person who doesn't have any expressed loyalty by taking an oath, like the military does, they can say whatever they want about Trump. At least they could until recently. Now it's a little iffy. But the military, I don't blame those guys for sitting there silent. Yes, they're gnashing their teeth. Yes, they're trying to, but they did a good job. But they can't say anything because they swore an oath to support their commander-in-chief, and Trump's their commander-in-chief.
They never gave it to him. Nobody clapped.
It's the
Nobody acknowledged him, and
Constitution,
you
not
made a
the
fool of him
president.
so beautifully.
The oath is to the Constitution, not to the president.
Thank you for clarifying that. I just assumed that members of the military would have a special clause in their oath, or implied that they have to, their commander-in-chief is the president of the United States.
All of us elected officials take oaths, and we do not take our oaths to the president.
True.
We take it to the Constitution.
I agree, I remember, but I
No,
just,
it's true.
I
He
just,
is the commander-in-chief.
but I just thought militaries was different, but maybe
So
not.
there's a chain of command.
Yes.
So they're supposed to obey orders, but it's not an oath
Lawful
of
order.
loyalty.
I agree with it. Hegseth was horrible. I can't believe he did that. I can't believe they tolerated that, even though they're pretty constrained. And then Trump, I don't know how he could be worse, but he was. But that's, everything Trump does amazes me, and I can't believe that it's accepted, but that's been true for 9 years now.
I want to get back to talking about money. Sorry. I think there's too much money in politics all across the board. And I'm just curious, with the kinds of things that our current president is doing and spending money on, are we going to literally run out of money? I mean, the money to send the National Guard here and there or pay them.
Right.
Run the government, and you furloughed or laid off half of the people. You're going to spend $400 million on a new jet. You're going to build a ballroom. I mean, I know some of this is private donations, but I honestly wonder, what is the health of the finances in
Well,
our
the
country?
good news about the federal government is you can print your own money. And so we just go deeper and deeper into debt. The federal debt is rising at ridiculous rates.
With inflation and everything
Yes,
else.
yeah, so it's, we pass on this burden to our children.
This may sound simplistic, but I've always had the sense for decades, probably everybody does in both parties, is that Democrats want to work harder to make a more level playing field, so it creates more regulation. We probably all agree with that. And Republicans tend to resist that. No, too big government already. No, it costs too much. No, we're free, independent. Okay, that's both legitimate points of view. I sense more than ever in recent years that more and more people get more fed up with the Democratic way of just layering on the government to be thicker and thicker and thicker, and that's why the Republicans are winning. That's why Trump won. Partly, but maybe largely. So money, I don't know. That's probably why Trump's appeal saying, you're right, the government's spending way too much money. I'm going to save you a whole bunch of money. I'm going to cut 10, 20, 30% of the federal government workforce. And a lot of people are saying, yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, and to be fair, this Prop 50 is going to cost California $280 million. Just like the recall of Newsom a couple years ago cost about the same. When you hold a special election, you got to pay for it.
But I don't think I'm not too worried about the government running out of money. First of all, sending the National Guard troops doesn't really cost us anything, because what would they be doing otherwise? Sitting in their own home states, training to do things overseas. That's what they were hired for, and that's what they signed up for, and that's what they've been trained for, not going to cities. But Trump's moving them into cities. Now, there's some cost, but I don't think it's good.
Housing and feeding and
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Okay.
I've always been fascinated by people, lots of people, who vote against their own self-interest. I mean, that's always just flummoxed me. And now it seems like more than ever. And my own speculation about that is because of the siloing of news that you know more about than any of us, but the social media aspect of it, and how if you hear something, but remember when Trump said, I'm going to lower the cost of eggs, and then he didn't lower the cost of eggs. So the
Right.
people who, I mean, how can you not see, like, okay, so let me get to the question. What do you think is going to happen in the midterms?
Oh. I'll preface that by saying two things. One, I've been wrong on every prediction about Trump, for 10 years. So who knows? And also, Bruce Jenkins, the great longtime Chronicle sports columnist, when he would make predictions, he would before the sports season, he would say, my annual version of being dead wrong in public.
Oh, yes.
So I'll what the hell?
Initial caps like it was an official category. Being dead wrong in public.
Being dead wrong in public. So, I mean, history has it that, the party that the president's party loses seats in the midterm, and that's been a historic trend that's been pretty accurate for many years. Now, the size of that wave, we thought there was going to be a big red wave a couple years ago. There was a big blue wave. So that's another thing. When you think about Prop 50, maybe it won't even be needed if there's such a big blue wave that these 5 extra seats from California. If there's 30 seats, 30-seat swing, might not need it.
But if it's a small blue wave.
If it's a small blue wave, it'll help. But anyways, it all depends on a few things. Number one, everything is about the economy and healthcare. If people see their healthcare premiums double, as is predicted, you will be pissed off at the person in charge, and there's no doubt who is in charge right now. If the price of eggs doesn't increase or doesn't decrease significantly, that'll be a factor. But it all depends on what metrics how does it affect your pocketbook? It's the economy.
As you probably know,
stupid.
thank you for mentioning those things. And as you probably know, it's probably all you know, that presidents get blamed or take credit for a lot of things that they have no control over. But it doesn't mean I want to take credit for it if it's good news and say, hey, I have nothing to do with that if it's bad news. And then they can switch if the news switches next year or whatever. But so I think this is one of those things that the president can't really control it, but they try to get blame over. But more importantly, I think, it's how to try to have it both ways. Why are people voting against their best interest? There have been books written on that. And I think it's because what Trump says appeals to them about we talked about this earlier, the system being rigged in favor of the rich. So all these poor people out there, they're saying, yeah, I believe him. The system is rigged in favor of the rich. I'm getting screwed. I'm poor. So I'm going to vote for that guy who says the system is favored because he'll blow up boxes and he'll fix things. Not really thinking through the fact that this is a very rich guy himself. He's more likely to favor policies favoring the rich. And he does that when he says things like, I created the greatest tax cut in history. Well, maybe for the rich people, but he says, poor people too, middle class people too. No, I think that
disproportionately went to the wealthiest Americans. Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm concerned about the long-term effects of the cuts on the medical grants and the universities and that's even affecting us at UCSF.
Right.
How long is it going to take to regain?
That is terrifying. I went to UC Berkeley with Latifah Simon, who was the new congresswoman from the East Bay. She took Barbara Lee's spot when Barbara Lee decided not to run. And who was the other one? Ted Lieu from Central California, 2 Democrats. They were touring. They wanted to see what was going on at Berkeley. And Berkeley has developed this system called a CRISPR, which can take a look at your genes and modify your genes to get rid of disease and all this stuff. They're working on cures for sickle cell and all this amazing work. And they're at the risk of losing funding. UCLA Trump threatened to pull $1 billion of funding from that school. It's terrifying. That's a major scare, and we won't know because it's be hard to quantify what could we have done, without this money. It's like sort of I don't know if it's a counterfactual or something. We don't know what we wouldn't have been able to do without this money. But think of all the research that's being curtailed. And the researchers, because many of the people there are young graduate students. These funds are helping them to survive and be able to be researchers and fund their work and give them a small stipend. Nobody's getting rich at these young researchers, and so it's a terrible situation. And it was done it wasn't done with surgically with a scalpel. It was done with a machete. So it's a terrible situation, and we're all the worse for it.
When we don't turn that around quickly.
No, you can't.
People are going to other. I even know one lady that's going over to England because she's here being funded.
Yeah, exactly. There will be a brain drain to other countries.
Exactly.
Yes.
And in terms of turning things around, I was thinking too that more and more every year I think, well, the next president will come in from a different party and reverse everything the prior president has done. And I was thinking that we'll get a Democratic president next time, and it'll reverse all these horrible things Trump is doing. But I don't know. I worry about some of these things being more permanent than usual. It seems like that they can't be reversed. I mean, and the 6-3 Supreme Court majority in favor of Republicans or being appointed by Republican presidents is a big imbalance. It's been close for a lot of decades. This is not close. And
Another question, Greg, over here.
please.
Yeah, I'm interested in what you think about the grassroots. There was mention of women's marches when Trump was initially elected, but nothing grew out of that. There was no organizing, there was no coming together, no pushing on any particular issues.
In his
Now,
first term you're speaking?
yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so, but now, No King's Day, I think, is a good example of growth among the grassroots. There are new, for instance, indivisible groups all over the country every week. So, and there are banners that are hung from the freeway overpasses over 101 multiple days every single week right here in Marin County. What do you think is the power, if any, of the grassroots?
Well, I'll give you a few examples. One is, and I want to push back on you a little bit on that, the Women's March. I covered that in D.C., and actually I covered the second one when I was back there earlier this year, which is much smaller and didn't get the, but still sizable. It's like maybe 40 to 60,000 people, not a million before, but think of all the other groups that grew out of that, maybe not necessarily directly out of the Women's March, but out of the sort of the ferment of pushing back on Trump. Swing Left and groups that organize, that focus on organizing in swing states and swing districts. So there was a lot of little organizations that came up out of that, and Indivisible is also one that came out of that ferment. And the power of protest is you get to see, you get to feel like I'm not alone. I'm scared. I'm frightened. I'm angry. Am I the only person that feels this way? You go out and you see you're sharing that space with other people who feel those same feelings, and then you maybe let's start a group that does this, or let's organize this, or let's do that. So there is power in mass protest. I think, and studies have shown that too. So there is power in that. It's just there's all the countervailing thing is some people are like, oh, what does it matter, you know? I think it still matters to show that there is people who don't agree with what's going on now, and to show up in those spaces is important.
Jared Huffman, of course, gets asked that question all the time at all his town halls, and I go to most of them. And Spotswood was asked about it last month here, and it's a really good question. And I don't think there is a really good answer. I'm not sure I love the answer that Huffman and Spotswood and everybody else gave about go out and march on the streets, stand in the overpasses. I live right underneath the overpass. I see them. It used to be every weekend. Now it's every day sometimes. And it's God bless them. They're doing something. They want to do something. They need to do something. Even if that's the only thing they do all week, stand up there and wave a flag or a sign. I don't think it does a lot of good, but I can't think of something that's going to do more than that. And if they need to just physically get up there and wave something that's going to make them feel better physically, go for it. Do it. And, once in a while they get a honk, and maybe it makes somebody think for a second. Probably not a lot of good, but it's something. It keeps them plugged in, feeling like I'm at least saying I'm here, and I oppose Trump.
Yeah, I was in Portland last week, to cover the war. A buddy of mine said, "Hey, do you think you're do you officially qualify as a war correspondent?" It's like the old Doonesbury character. And there was there's nothing going on in Portland. Like half the people there don't even work all day. I don't know what. I've never been to a city where more people are day drinking and having coffee and hanging out all day. What the hell do people do in Portland? But anyways, it was the Portlandia. The old line was, "It's where the young go to retire." But wonderful city. I had a great time. But still, it's like, this is the war zone. This is, oh my God, it's horrible. It's like, it's not horrible.
So that's
anyway. So that I went out to the ice center where the ground zero of the war zone. And there was a gentleman there, a retired airline worker. He said, "I've done everything in the airline except fly the plane or be a stewardess." Okay. So, and I was like, well, why are you out here? And he goes, I just was so anxious, I couldn't take the shit anymore, so I came out here, and this was what I was doing. This makes me feel good to represent and say, we try and talk to people when they come in. They're coming into the ICE headquarters, like, say, do you need someone to walk in with you? Do you need someone, let's give us your name in case, you don't come out, and all that kind of stuff. And so that was a visceral thing that gave him, felt like I'm doing something. So I'm a big believer in that stuff, so.
I think we're getting toward the end. We have another one here. Go ahead.
Yeah. Do you have any ideas about what can be done about the lobby industry so that my vote counts a little more?
The lobby industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If by that you mean the professional lobbyists hired
Yes.
by big corporations, and the last count, like the oil industry alone, had several lobbyists per member of Congress.
Right. And, they heavily influence my representatives because my representative gets a lot of money from them in order to run. And so I'm curious if you have some ideas about what could be done about that so that representation by the people is stronger.
Yeah, well, public displays, if you get people to band together about something and lobby themselves, like as a group, that would be good. There should be lobbying restrictions on who can be a lobbyist. There's been proposals about you can't have a member of Congress becoming a lobbyist because that person would they know the game. They know they're the best lobbyists because they know how to.
Two-year ban?
You could widen that ban. You could do all kinds of things there, but that's a really good point. It's very hard to combat that because those folks they know the game and they know how to play it, and they know they propose legislation that is favorable to the industry they're lobbying for, obviously, and they're backed by big money, so they're a formidable force.
I don't think there's a simple answer to how you could have a larger voice compared to them, but there are two things going on there. They're not just, there's the money, but I think even worse than the money is the fact that they're getting to have these meetings and meeting with them all the time and influencing their legislation. Now, they do that because they need their money. If we break that money link, then they could say, no thanks, don't want to meet with you. Now, that would seem a little arrogant if an individual person wanted to meet with their congressman. The congressman should say yes every single time. But if a big oil company's been lobbying him for years, decades, says, I want to meet with you for our usual hour meeting, I said, don't need to do that anymore. I'm a clean candidate now. I take public money, don't need your money, so thank you, but no thank you, good luck.
And you can support candidates who say, I don't take any federal PAC money, I don't take money that comes from corporate lobbyists. And you see some people, or oil companies, or tobacco, or whatever your jam is. You can support those candidates and make a point to tell your friends about that.
But most people don't know that there are a few candidates that do that go without that kind of money. Because it's voluntary, and because everybody takes it. So they expect a certain amount of mailers, and if you don't get a certain number of mailers from a candidate, it must not be a serious candidate, it must not be able to raise money, it must not be well liked. So we're stuck in this problem unless we can break that money link, as several of you were saying.
All right, I think, want to do one more question and then we'll call it.
It's my paisan back there, he's got to ask a question.
My question would be, as a newspaper man,
Yeah.
we all know that we're kind of influenced, or if we look at CNN, we're going to see a certain type of slant. If we were to look at Fox, we're going to see a certain type of slant. When you work for a newspaper organization, as part of that organization, is everybody cool, and you just assume that whatever you write, they're going to print? Or when you write articles, has it happened where sometimes the editor or whoever would say, no, we're not going to run that?
Because of the political, no, that has never happened. I can honestly say that's never happened to me. And we used to have a couple publishers ago, who was very conservative, and he particularly did not like, or was, I wouldn't say unlike, don't like, but uncomfortable about LGBTQ stories in particular. And it was around, when the marriage battle was happening, and he was not comfortable with that. And he also, only one time he came up to me and said, I had a small line in the story about it's easier to get a gun in Texas than to get a birth certificate or something. I'm blowing the line, but that's something like that. And he goes, why don't you ever say something about this? What would you say? And it's the only time he ever said anything. And he, when he's in the hallway, he'd call me a socialist or something like that. But he was very cool, you know, he never did anything. When he left, I said, let's have a shot. I appreciate it that you did not screw with anything we wrote, and thank you. But that's not, what we do, there is a difference, you know, the people who write the editorials, like the editorial page, they're sort of a firewall between what they, like they have opinions, and they sort of speak for the institution of the Chronicle, and but that's separate from what I do. When I write about the news or do analysis or write opinion about, you know, politics. But I don't feel the need to reflect what the Chronicle's opinion is. You know, they may endorse this candidate, and I'll be like, well, that person's full of crap, and so I write that. And I have freedom to do that. Thank you.
But I just want to say about the Chronicle and newspapers generally, I said I'm a newspaper junkie for 50, 60 years, and most people know that, I've heard that it's a dying industry. It is in the sense that the readership, the print delivery is dropping precipitously, and has for years or decades. But the Chronicle is a rare one. Apparently it's making a lot of money because more and more people are reading online.
Yeah, we are officially profitable. I don't know how, but we are, and I'm very grateful for it. So yes.
Well, let's hope it keeps going.
Me too.
Let's thank these guys.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
I knew Joe and Greg would really kill it. They did. And if they're around and you want to chat a little bit more as we're going home, feel free. Don't forget to check out the view. We're here in a new venue, so those who are here for the first time, hope you like it, and the views are incredible out there. Let me just remind you, our next event, November 13, Dr. Matt Willis will be here. And then lastly, I just want to thank Alan Shavitz for all of his hard work putting these programs together. And thank all of you for coming, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Have a good one.